to make sure they get the product that they want and it fits all the specifications. Um, and then that kind of brings the question about why to go to all this effort. Why do we want to fight food fraud? The main reasons are that food fraud erodes consumer trust in that product category. It creates an unfair advantage for companies that are willing to do the illegal acts. And then it also just creates an environment where bending the rules is something you need to do to succeed. So I'll just try to, as well, while I have time here, just try to answer some of these questions. Um, we too, as we talked about before, feel that the main reasons for the main drivers of food fraud are mislabeling and misbranding, having a short weight or a short count in the product, and then adding in undeclared additives that should not belong there, just mainly for the reason of financial gain. And as I mentioned too, we as NFI ask our members to promote that they're doing best practices to maintain economic integrity and to do their business in a trustworthy manner. And we feel some of the best incentives for getting companies to invest in fraud prevention would be to reduce the regulatory and enforcement risks, to limit their liability exposure. That's an important one. And also we just ask, and also to financial incentives such as grants for technology would help companies along the way with, offsetting the cost of implementation of things like blockchain implementation, things like that. Um, and with that, I'll hand it back to Esther if there's any other questions.
Thank you, Mark. I think we can go to the next panelist, Maria. We have today with us Maria Martinez Herrera. She's a journalist with over 20 years of experience. She she works at the Spanish Association of Distributors, self-service stores and supermarkets, which represents approximately 75% of the food retail market share in Spain. Maria is currently serving as a policy advisor and coordinates the association working groups on food safety, quality, and consumer fairness. Additionally, she is a member of the Advisory Council of the Spanish Agency for Food Safety and Nutrition and actively participates in committees of the European Retail Association. She also sits on several working groups dedicated to seafood and aquaculture products, a sector where Spain is an important global player in both production and consumption. And retailers are, of course, often the final checkpoint before products reach consumers. So we thought that Maria could offer today a useful view on how the retail sector ensures supply chain integrity and the challenges they face. And Maria will be answering some important questions during her presentation today. She will explain the main challenges they face in verifying authenticity of aquatic products, also how retailers manage risk related to mislabeling or substitution in complex international supply chains, and the role of private standards, suppliers, audits, and third-party certifications in preventing fraud, as well as how to balance also the cost pressures with investments in traceability and verification systems. And also looking ahead, how do you see the role of retailers evolving in driving transparency and accountability is something that we would like to hear from you, Maria. So with this, please, Maria, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Esther. Thank you, Esther. Thank you to the FAO organization about this webinar. I'm sorry for my English because it's not my language, so I will try to do the best. Thanks to Mark because he's in the States, and in the States right now is, I don't know, it's night. And I don't know, this is a great webinar. We are people from all the world, so it's fantastic because it's the great representation of this. I think the fish, the freeze supply chain is the most complex in the world, so that's why we are all here. And I just have a few slides to show you what is ACEDAS. As Esther said, we are a supermarket association in Spain. I think that the most important figures that we have is that we represented 20,000 points of sales. In all these points of sales, you can buy aquatic products, canned or frozen, and in around a half of our stores, we sell fresh aquatic products. So you can imagine what important is for us. And as Mark said, we think that we all of us have to fight against the fish the fish fraud, because we need the trust of the consumers. Then I think we are going to talk with the consumers. Roy is going to talk about that, but is the main reason to do all this that we are doing, no? And about the questions, I just put in the slide what is happening right now in Spain, we are a very important consumer country, but right now we have a problem of that the consumer is declined. So this is why we are fighting about this too. And about the question that Esther just question me about the retails, that we are in the final checkpoint. That's true, but we think that this, as I just say, this is a very complex and global supply chain, and one of our most important challenge here is the traceability. No, that I think Christina made a very good presentation about how we control the food fraud, but the traceability is the most important issue that we have right now. How we work with this, and to work of this, the control upstream, knowing in the retail, of course, that the controls are very important, but is for us the very important issue is to work with the suppliers. If we need to trust the suppliers, is the most important issue in this one, and this to work with the traceability system, the relationship of the traceabilities, and to assure this is the big challenge. So how, I don't know, Esther, if you want me to ask again about the how we manage this, the risk control, or I can talk about this.
I think, Maria, that for the interest of time,
Yes.
maybe we can go ahead and ask the next panelist, and then maybe we can take on some additional questions later, time permitting. So the
Yes.
next speaker, but thank you very much. I take note of the main issues. Traceability seems to be very common for the different stakeholders as a common issue. Now we will pass the floor to Ms. Lee Han, she's the Deputy General Secretary and Communication Director of Vietnam Association of Seafood Exporters and Producers, where she leads the communication strategy, seafood market intelligence, database industry reports, publication, digital platforms, and media engagement. She's also the chief editor of the association, and regularly represents the association at domestic and international conferences on Vietnam's seafood industry, trade, and market trends. She has nearly 30 years of experience in seafood, trade analysis, industry communications, market reporting, and policy advocacy. And we invited Lihan because with her we have the perspective of an important exporting country. We know that exporters must comply with multiple market requirements, those of the own nation and also international standards. And we wanted her to answer some important questions with her intervention. I don't know whether she has a presentation or not, but I mean, Lihan, do you have a presentation or you will just be answering to some of the questions?
Thank you. I don't have slides.
No
I
problem.
mean,
So I will be asking you some questions and then you can. So the main questions is how do different standards and regulations affect fraud? And what are the biggest challenges producers face in ensuring traceability and authenticity from farm to and harvest to export? And how do you ensure integrity across fragmented supply chains, particularly those involving small-scale producers? Back to you. Thank you, Lihan.
Thank you, Ms. Esther, and thank you, FAO, and especially Ms. Celine connecting me and invite me to be panelist in this very important webinar. Yes, I will answer now. The first question of Ms. Esther, I think that's from an exporter, Vietnam exporting of seafoods perspective. I see differing standards and regulation are very practical challenge. Each market may have its own requirements on food safety, labeling, commercial specie names, SS codes, CAS certificates, IUU regulation, traceability records, and sustainability certification, and also private requirements from importers or retailers. On the positive side, I think high standards help improve the control and reduce fraud risk. However, when requirements are too different, not harmonized or not compatible in terms of data, exporters have to manage many parallel documentation systems. And this increased compliance costs creates a higher risk or administrative errors. And in some cases, it may create gaps that fraudulent operator can exploit. For Vietnam, these different market requirements are also a strong motivation to continue upgrading the whole system. Now Vietnam is improving traceability in a more comprehensive way, not only at the final export stage, but across the chain, from the legal requirements, official control by the competent authorities, fishing vessels, ports, farming areas, raw material suppliers, processing plants, and export documentation. The companies increasingly understand that the compliance is not only about meeting the requirements of one particular market, but about maintaining the long-term the credibility of Vietnamese seafood. And therefore, for responsible exporter, the issue is not to lower standards. The issue is to make standard clearer, more harmonized, and more practical to implement. When market requirements are transparent, consistent, and when guided, responsible companies can comply better, and fraudulent practices will have less room to exist. And the second question, I think that the biggest challenges for the ensuring traceability now is the difference between the aquaculture supply chains and capture fishery supply chains. Because for aquaculture products, the traceability is usually more structured because farm feed production cycles, harvest and delivery to processing plants can be managed under a system. Many Vietnamese companies have invested in farming areas, farm costs, quality control, international certification, and international traceability system. But for captured seafood, however, the supply chain is much more complex. Raw material may come from many fishing vessels, many fishing trips, and different landing ports, then pass through the collector, the middle agencies, preliminary processor, cold storage facility, processing plants, and finally exporters. If data at one point is incomplete, inaccurate, or not verifiable, the whole traceability chain can be affected. For this reason, Vietnam is approaching the traceability as a vertical supply chain issue, not merely as a factory level requirement. This requires a coordination among many stakeholders, competent authority, local governments, fishing ports, fishman collector, preliminary processor, cold stores, processing plant, and exporters. When each link in the chain understands its responsibility and data is recorded correctly from the beginning, the ability to verify origin and prevent fraud will be significantly improved. This is an area where Vietnam is continuing to improve, especially in the context of the stricter requirements on IUU fishing, catch certification, and trace fraud prevention. Vietnam does not avoid this issue. We recognize it as an area that must continue to be upgraded in order to maintain the reputation of Vietnamese seafoods in international markets. And the third, how do we ensure the integrity across a fragment supply chain, particularly involving the small-scale producer? It's I think, appropriate Vietnamese context. I believe that we cannot ensure integrity in the fragmented supply chain through one single measure. We need several layers of control and at the same time. At the company level, exporters need to select and evaluate suppliers, check raw material document, and cross-check information on fishing vessels, fishing areas, landings, catch certificates, fishing logbooks, and other relevant records. Companies also need clear procurement rules, and they should not purchase raw material with unclear origin, illegal origin, or sign of IUU risks. At the supply chain level, we need stronger port control, standards, data, and better connection between authorities, fishing ports, processors, exporters, and importers. And at association level, VASEP play a role in updating market requirements, organizing training, encouraging companies to strengthen due diligence across the supply chain, and reflecting practical difficulties to government agencies so that solutions can be more effective. In practice, Vietnam recognizes that fragmented supply chain can only become transparent when each actor is properly guided, monitored, and supported. Therefore, improvement efforts are not limited to exporters. They also include stronger control of fishing ports, greater responsibility of vessel owners, collectors, preliminary processors, and factories. Exporters are also becoming more proactive in supplier due diligence, raw material document checks, and refusing the sources with unclear origin or IUU risk. And it is also important to recognize that small-scale fishermen and small suppliers cannot meet complex traceability requirements alone without the guidance and sustainable tool. Therefore, capacity building for small actors in the chain is essential. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee Han. I take well note of some of your comments, especially when it comes to harmonization of requirements and the difficulties of the small-scale sector. And now with this, we pass to the floor to Audun Lem. He's chair of the International Board of Fisheries Transparency Initiative, FITI. He is widely recognized for his leadership in fisheries governance, trade, food systems, and multilateral policy processes. Before joining FITI as a chair, Dr. Lem had a long career in the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, where he served as Deputy Director of the Fisheries and Aquaculture Division. He also served for many years as Secretary of the FAO Subcommittee on Fish Trade and as a coordinator of the FAO GLOBEFISH project. His work has focused on strengthening transparency, accountability, and evidence-based decisions, making fisheries and aquaculture governance and trade. In making fisheries and aquaculture governance and trade. So we invited him because we thought that he could provide a different angle, and there are a number of questions out on that I would like you to answer. The first one is, how does lack of transparency contribute to food fraud in fisheries and aquaculture? The second is, what are the key governance gaps that allow fraud to persist? Then how can transparency initiatives complement regulatory enforcement? And the last, what lessons can be drawn from countries that have successfully improved transparency in the aquatic sector? So with this, back to you, Audun.
Well, thank you, Esther, and thank you for inviting me. And it's very nice to be back with you all. You have a number of questions, and I think my answer will be somewhat generic, but trying to address each of them. I think also all my previous speakers in the panel have also addressed already the complexity of the fisheries value chain, the number of species, the intricacies of running global supply chains in our sector, the number of species, products, etc. The fact that you now have more and more value-added products and fillets, so you don't see the origin of the fish anymore, you just see the fillet, etc., or the final product. I think all those issues have been nicely addressed by my colleagues. So I will say that any effective management depends on good data. Without good data and good science, you cannot manage, or you cannot manage well or effectively. And that's the same in our sector. So if you want to manage effectively aquatic value chains with fisheries products, you need data. You need data on trade, on catches, where they're coming from, who is fishing, who has the license, all those issues. And those are issues that are addressed also by FITI in my new role as the chair of the Fisheries Transparency Initiative. In fact, we have a FITI standard, which has just been updated, and we have a number of parameters and chapters on what a country ideally should address. We want a country to publish as much as possible of what is available, and many countries do not do that. Many countries have the information, but it may be in different ministries, different authorities, so it's there somewhere, but it's very difficult to find. So we are trying through FITI to work together with countries to make them publish what is available. If the data is not available, that is also okay, as long as you commit to improve the situation, to gather the data and to publish. We have a number of situations also where the data is there, but for all sorts of reasons, the governments choose to publish, for example, aggregated data, whereas what we need is more species-oriented data also in trade, and not just species groups, for example. We've also seen that by having more transparency, you get more involvement by the various stakeholders. You have a better buy-in into the decisions. In FITI, we have something called national multi-stakeholder groups, So each country will form a stakeholder group with broad participation from the industry, from the NGOs, and from the government itself. And we've seen that improves the situation, it improves dialogue, and it makes it also easier for civil society to ask questions that are relevant for improving fisheries management. So better data, more transparency in the data, broader dissemination of the data also to consumers and consumers group is very important. I must also say, though, that we are also supporting countries and FAO in improving the nomenclature of or the names of the species, because very often there are regional names for the species. There may be mislabeling also at times because of misunderstanding and confusion about the different names. Not only do different regions in the same country have different names, but the same name of a fish may mean different things in different countries. We have a number of situations like that in Europe, for example, in South America. So agreed definition of species, of products, I think will also improve the situation. And also, to improve the situation it's very important that governments work very closely with the private sector, with the companies, to make sure that what is being done in terms of regulation is practicable, is doable, and it also builds on the practical experience of the companies, because it's in the end it's the companies that have to implement all the traceability regulations or all the catch certificates and all this and that, which is fine, but it has to be done in such a way that it's doable and workable and practical. So I think also FAO is doing a great job in this and improving the discussion on traceability, on access to data, on transparency. And we in FITI as well are very happy to see that FAO is an observer on our board together with the World Bank, for example, and that also is helping the agenda to move forward on transparency in fisheries. Thank you.
Thank you, Audun. Also, we take note of the comments and your perspective. Indeed, traceability and data and traceability of this data and transparency is also are also very important points. And with this, we pass on the floor to consumers with Roy Palmer. Professor Roy Palmer is a founder and CEO of the Seafood Consumer Association and a former senior consumer behavior expert for FAO, specializing in seafood fraud prevention and consumption strategies. With more than 50 years in post-harvest seafood, and he consulted for the Mexican government on boosting seafood intake and developed FAO strategies for Saudi Arabia. And as a panelist, Roy Palmer brings a consumer frontline expertise to combat global seafood fraud through transparency, education, and policy. And I have a number of questions for Roy that he'll be answering throughout his presentation. I know he has prepared a very short presentation. The questions are, from a consumer perspective, what types of fraud are most concerning in seafood products? How does food fraud affect consumer trust and purchasing behavior? And what information do consumers currently lack when trying to make informed choices? And the fourth question, what role can consumer organizations play in detecting or reporting fraud? And last one, and very important for us, how can FAO contribute to improving consumer awareness and trust at the global level? And with this, over to you, Ryan. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And thank you to FAO GLOBEFISH, all the people that have turned up today, and also all my fellow panelists for making this a very encouraging start to a lot of work that's got to be done by us all, I feel. So how many times have you been to a webinar or an event over the last year or so where consumers have actually been invited and we've started talking about fraud in the seafood industry? I would say it's a rarity. So one of the things that we're starting with now is actually uh, getting this movement on its way. Because at the end of the day, it's not just a government job, it's not just an industry job. It it's a job for all of us. We've all got to start collaborating and sharing in this information and knowledge. I'm sure we all learnt from those presentations earlier today about different things that we probably didn't even know were happening in this whole process. Um, so I've been in the industry for 50 odd years, and so I've done most things in the post-harvest industry, and I've probably been guilty a lot of these issues myself over the years. But along my journey, I decided to improve, and unfortunately, it's not happening with so many other people. But hopefully, we'll get to that point in the end. Um, Ladies and gentlemen, without the consumer, there is no need for the seafood industry or need of regulations. Consumers are your principal partner, and the issue of fraud is concerning us as the industry seems to be on a slippery slope in a race to the bottom. Hopefully, we're now aware of the technical paper that Esther and Christina were involved in, and the great work that's been done behind the scenes in that particular area. This should make us more informed about these issues. But when 1 in 5 seafood products may be mislabeled, this is no longer an industry issue. It is a consumer rights issue. Consumers have every right to know what species they are buying, where it came from, and how it was harvested or produced. Why is seafood fraud still treated as an industry compliance matter rather than a consumer protection matter? When consumers do not know the truth, then everybody loses. Yes, good. It worked well. Thank you. So we've had a lot of discussion about species substitution. And of course, it was great to see the SOFIA report come out this week, and great figures, about where we're going, where the catches are coming from. Because at the end of the day, we all love seafood, so therefore it's important that we see progression. However, on the surface, this is an excellent report, but sadly, our webinar will highlight some issues which are not being dealt with as they should. One of the areas our consumer association feels is lacking is basic seafood training. It seems that at the window of the industry, there is a lack of trained staff. From a personal point of view, I embrace seafood training as an employer. I became a qualified trainer and I secured a diploma in seafood processing. It can be done at certificate 2 or 3 level. It doesn't need to be at the high level, but it seems to be an issue that is no longer on the industry's menu. It is rare to go to an event and see training or improvements in our staff as being an integral, important step. And to me, when you look at all the complex issues that we deal with in seafood, from the number of species to the way we harvest product, to all the different trade that takes place, to all the specifications that are required, you can't just walk into a retail shop off the street and know everything. It's impossible. So we do need some basic training, because otherwise that's going to come and bite hard if consumers are not informed correctly about the issues. Species substitution is just one of many fraudulent activities, as you've heard today. I'm not going to go through them because they were mentioned. This slide indicates the major issues as we see them. The consumer says, if I do not receive what I reasonably believe I am paying for, then I have been deceived. Now, interestingly enough, in Australia, and obviously every country operates in different ways, but in Australia, we've had an Australian fish name standard, AS 5300, since 2007. I had an integral role in that from about 1976 right the way through to 2014. It's a fantastic standard. It's a global standard where the organization has actually achieved awards. And yet in Australia, Food Standards Australia and New Zealand do not see it as an imperative from a food safety perspective and only make it a voluntary standard. Now, this is a nonsense, because if you don't know the fish that you're dealing with, how can you have a food safety plan? How can you have a food recall plan? So, these are areas where the regulation has not been implemented properly. And again, I'm using Australia as an example. I'm not blaming other particular areas. So I was asked about what is the worst fraud that is actually happening. And in my feeling, the biggest problem is weights and measures. And that, effectively, from a fraud angle, is about addition, adulteration, and dilution. I bring, again, the Australian perspective to this, as I've mentioned on the slide here, that in the USA and in the European Union, they seem to treat short-weighted product as fraud, or, I love the words here, economically motivated adulteration, and is stopped at the border. In Australia, and maybe many other countries, weights and counts on domestic and imported seafood is treated as a commercial quality issue between the exporter and the importer. There are no border checks and hence no consumer protection. The person who suffers the potential loss on such transactions in Australia is the end user. That may well be a restaurant that thaws the product, or it may be a consumer that thaws the product. In the last week, I've spoken to a number of importers about this, and I hear that when they are placing orders from overseas, the exporter is well aware of the issue and offers various weight and count alternatives. This is a race to the bottom unless we're all aware and can start getting back to correct weights and counts. Part of me, if I go back to the first few weeks of when I started in the seafood industry back in 1972, I was working for an import-export company, and we were exporting scallops from Port Phillip Bay in Melbourne to France and Germany. And in those days, we had received our orders via aerogram. And the aerogram said, "Dear Roy, we'd like to order another 5 tons of scallops, but can you please not include the water because we have plenty of water in Germany?" And I thought at the time, what is this man talking about? And then I looked further into the process. And quite clearly, if you are processing scallops, by stirring water and maybe other additives, you can add 100% to the weight of a scallop. And this is what was happening back in those days. And clearly, things are not improving that much. Nowadays, you're finding people are packing, instead of a 1 kilo pack of prawns, they're packing 700 grams. And they're packing that because people who are maybe doing the 1 kilo are adding extra water, and there's only 700 grams in the packet. So, they've had to, if they're honest brokers, honest people, they need to change that process, excuse me, in order to be competitive on the marketplace. So these are important things, and I think this is one of the worst things that's happening. And every time you get a product and you're cheated on the weight, you wonder, should I be buying seafood? Okay. So seafood is one of the greatest products you can put in your mouth for nutrition and well-being. Consumers cannot make informed nutritional choices if they are uncertain about authenticity. Consumers cannot support sustainability if they do not trust labels. And when it comes to sustainability, there are simply too many labels. At the end of the day, the greatest cost of seafood fraud and confusing labels is the erosion of trust. And once lost, it is difficult to rebuild that. That is why we must all act now before it is too late. One of the things we haven't spoken about is how it impacts other areas of our industry. And I recall I'm not going to give the names of the company, but there was an issue in South Australia about fish feed where the quality of the product, the quantities involved in that fish feed were not as they were supposed to be. And the people were counterfeiting, if you like, that particular thing. So it happens right across our chain, including fish feed. Okay, got one more slide to go. So, we believe that the current regulatory vacuum rewards bad behavior. So not only is the consumer paying the price, but also so are honest operators. But additionally, seafood, the product that we all love, is paying the ultimate price. We are not just complaining, we are doing positive things to create change. Next month, we have a book being published, The Sea of Deception, The Hidden Crisis of Seafood Fraud. We're doing this from our love of seafood, not because we want to make a big story about these issues, but it's important that we are upfront about this because otherwise nothing will change. As part of that book, we've created a training program called iCadmus. This training program we see as an imperative for everyone handling or engaged in seafood, as unless you're aware of the fraudulent activities, you will struggle to conduct food safety and or food recalls. It should be seen as a pre-HACCP training program. An Australian university is working with us on this. There's also a website, icadmus.org, which will endeavour to be the one-stop shop for all seafood fraud matters. We are open to collaboration, so do not hesitate to engage, and that's how we see our relationship with FAO is working together on these things and understanding how FAO works. We might be able to work in different areas, in different ways, because of that particular situation. So we're open to any sort of collaboration in that respect. Once we have trialed the program in Australia, we intend to make it global and engage languages other than English. So finally, I just want to leave you with this. For the sake of seafood, let us collaborate and adopt continuous improvement on truth from harvest to belly. See something, do something. Do not ignore it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roy, for the very informative presentation and for the passion you put into this topic.
Sorry.
I think that the panel has been very productive. It has brought together a number of aspects that we should never forget when it comes to fraud. And one of them is transparency and traceability, and the importance of harmonization of requirements, which is key. Also, the discussions that are needed to address issues related to the misbranding or the glazing, the addition of water, other components that lead to the increase in weight and somehow deceive consumers. And also we take very good notes on how FAO could be taking the next steps for this to tackle food fraud and to contribute to solving this very complex issue. We also know that small-scale fisheries shouldn't be missed in these actions, and we are also very aware of the difficulties of many stakeholders and many nations to verify and to access laboratory capacities to contribute to the fight against food fraud. So with this, I think that we have enough information to work for the next 3-4 years. And I would like to give a chance to some of the participants to ask some questions to the panelists. For the sake of time, we're going to be selecting unlimited number. We have already answered some of the questions that were in the Q&A chat. And I'm going to pick one for Roy. It flows well because he has spoken the last. One of the participants, Roy, is asking, is the digital product passport relevant? It's going to be relevant. A relevant tool for consumers to improve trust? And if so, who will support the cost for it? Should it be mandatory or voluntary?
Okay, so ideally, I'm just thinking about this process. It's a complex thing because, as you could see from the discussions that we had with Christina and I had one in Australia with Anne Stowe as well. There's a lot of work being done behind the scenes in these areas, and of course, it's that fish name issue is one of the big problems in that space. There are a number of people I know that are doing apps now that are trying to get photos of fish on the apps, and then people go into a shop and they can align that fish and then learn about that fish. I think what we've got to do is to give some guidance. I think this is where FAO have enormous opportunity, I feel, is if we can get the guidance at the top level. When Mark spoke, he spoke about, they were invited by the government to create a document, and that involved industry. In our industry, there seems to be a lack of those sort of activities happening, whereby governments, industry, and consumers work together to solve these issues. And I think that's possibly a great thing that we could do. Because there are probably a million ideas out there about how to do this properly. And it will be like, when we started video and stuff like that, everyone will think they're going to claim the market. And it would be much better if we could give some guidance and work with people and trying to get one thing that across the nation. And it's the same thing with the sustainability. We started off with sustainability thinking, oh, what a great idea this is. Now, to me, it's a mess because there's so many labels. And it's hard to understand these things from a consumer perspective. It actually creates more confusion. So if you go in and look at a fish shop and you go and look at a meat shop, they don't have anything like all the information that we need in our place. And so that's what makes it complicated. So that's why I think we've got to give that guidance, a high level guidance, work on that and explain that situation. So that would be my take. But don't go out and spend a lot of money on things until you get that. Otherwise, good luck.
Thank you, Roy. And I'm gonna pick a couple of questions for Christina. There is one question, Christina, about how can an organization, I need to rewrite it because I don't know if it's correctly formulated or maybe I'm not interpreting the question as I should, but I think you're asking how can an organization request support to build capacity to test methyl mercury and what's the procedure? And then there is another question about the rapid screening, if that should be enough evidence, and how do you see the role of artificial intelligence? So methyl mercury, a capacity for methyl mercury, rapid screening, and the role of artificial intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for the questions, Esther and dear participants. Very interesting and important questions. First of all, our support to the laboratories of our member countries, member states, come after request from the country. And this is done through the technical cooperation program that we have established. So the technical cooperation program of IAEA has a national liaison officer in each member state. With this national liaison officer, you can discuss and request, if possible, your institute to be included in any current or future technical cooperation project. Actually, we are having now requests. We are receiving right now requests exactly for the methyl mercury analysis. So we will host fellows from different member states in September and December regarding this specific topic. So, but the first step is for you to see with a national liaison officer if there is a current and ongoing technical cooperation project in your country and how your institute can be request this kind of support from us. Then about the rapid screening analysis. We have seen a lot of potential with the rapid screening analysis, which, as I said, is a first tier analysis. And then for the positives or the suspect samples, we will require the confirmatory step. And sometimes even the rapid screening is enough. What is needed is to include the rapid screening techniques and analytical methods in the regulatory approved methodologies. Otherwise, there is a great potential for the rapid screening. And this goes hand in hand with the AI question, because authenticity and origin assessment in food is not only chemical analysis. It is a combination of analytical methods and digital tools. So what we do here in our lab is that we develop the analytical methodology. We run the analysis with as many as possible authentic samples first to create this authentic fingerprint, the signature of the authentic product, and create this database of analytical results. And then we use a specific software or other digital tools, now it's artificial intelligence and machine learning, to use this fingerprint and testing unknown samples. These digital tools, chemometric software or AI or machine learning, help us to discriminate and help us to decide if the unknown sample falls into the category of the authentic sample, authentic product or not. And it's very important to stress that the role of international organizations, and Roy already mentioned that, is very, very critical to give guidance, support research and development and adoption of digital tools, and make them affordable and accessible to all countries. Because many of the developing members are really struggling with adopting techniques. And this is our part, then the technical cooperation project that we support with technical capacity, even procurement of instruments and whatever the laboratories need to develop the specific application.
Thank you, Christina. So we're reaching the end. I'm going to be presenting the survey because I would like to close with the results of the survey. But there are a number of pending questions in the chat, which I believe that some of our panelists could also take the chance to answer. Probably Lihan, Maria, Mark, or Audun can answer some of the questions. Please feel free to answer the questions in the Q&A chat. Some of them, I believe, are your area, are within your area of expertise. So please help us with this. Otherwise, unanswered questions, we will try to get back to you as soon as we can by email and get your questions answered. With this, I'm going to share the screen to present the results of a survey that is still open. It will still be open until the last day of this month. So we invite you all to share your views and to answer the questions so we can get as much information as possible to guide the next steps. And so far, this survey that we launched with the aim to collect information about this issue and have the perspective of different actors. So far, we have 45 respondents covering 31 countries in total from all continents. And I did extract already some of the information we collected. And of course, species substitution has been scored as one of the main issue when it comes to fraud, followed by mislabeling of many sorts, also illegal, unreported, and unregulated catch, the use of undeclared additives or processing aids, the mixing of undeclared species in processed products, of course, issues related to weight, as we have been mentioning throughout the call. So the meeting, the fraud related to documentation. So it can be catch certificates, health certificates, export certificates, etc. False claims and certification related to sustainability, organic or other voluntary schemes. Of course, misbranding of products related to farmed versus wild products, and well, a long number of issues that people have been pointing at as being issues. And there are already a number of answers related to where FAO could focus future work affecting fisheries and aquaculture. And of course, data collection is one of them. It has also been mentioned by Aurlem. Data is very important. We need to understand what sort of studies are there. We need to carry out analysis. We need to work on consumer awareness in the development of guidance, as Roy also mentioned, and good practice manuals, including labeling. We were asked to work on capacity development for competent authorities, in improving legality and traceability frameworks. Also, we've been asked to support the standard setting process within Codex Alimentarius for matters that are relevant to this specific issue. We have been asked to keep on convening multilateral dialogue, like we did today, with governments, industry, civil society, etc. And we have also been asked to work on building capacity to improve testing capacity within the countries. As I said, the survey will be there until 30 June. So we invite you all to fill this survey. And with this, I would like to, Charlene has just posted on the chat. And with this, I would like to thank all the speakers for the wonderful contributions, to the GLOBEFISH team for all the support before and during the the event. Thank you very much for all the work you've done disseminating the event and the support that you've provided now. And of course, all the participants for the interest, for the time, for the questions. As I said, pending questions will still be answered. And we're running out of time, so I don't think I'm missing anything. Just thank you very much and see you soon.